Welcome to the Origins Science Scholars Program of the Institute for the Science of Origins. The Institute is a partnership of Case Western Reserve University, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, and IdeaStream. The Fall 2014 Origins Science Scholars Lectures are presented with the assistance of the Siegel Lifelong Learning Program, the College of Arts and Sciences, and MediaVision. Tonight, I'm very pleased to be here at the Tinkham-Veal University Center on the campus of Case Western Reserve University with you for our first lecture in this fall's 2014 series, Sleep, an Evolutionary Perspective, with Dr. Kingman Strohl. Dr. Strohl is a professor of medicine, physiology, and biophysics at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. He's director of the Sleep Disorder Program at the Lewis Stokes Veterans Administration Medical Center. He's research director of University Hospital's Case Sleep Disorders Center. He's chairman of the scientific committee of the Cleveland Translational Science Center at the Case School of Medicine. And he's been here since 1980, first at Metro Health, then at University Hospitals, and since 1991, also at the VA Medical Center. He's the author of over 250 articles and 100 reviews and editorials on sleep apnea, sleep, genetics, and pharmacology of respiratory control. So I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Kingman Strohl to tell us about sleep, an evolutionary perspective.
So thank you for coming out on a beautiful day, a fall, as the season is changing from long days to shorter days. And also thank you, Glenn, for the introduction. So today is the first of two lectures. One is going to be on evolution and sleep, and next week will be on evolution and sleep disorders. Today I'm going to try to focus a bit on the physiology and biology, and then some of the dimensions that exist in the evolution of sleep in the human condition. So the reason that we sleep is grounded first in the oscillation of the Earth in terms of light and dark. The rotation of the Earth on its axis influences the physiology of all organisms. The ability to anticipate those activities which are better suited for darkness or for light is an important function of all organisms. And evolution has taken advantage of that particular environmental forcing to produce a variety of behaviors. And today we'll talk a little bit about sleep. First, the evolution of light sensitivity itself. This is a 4 billion year evolutionary trajectory. And in terms of thinking about this trajectory, it starts with the early organisms Leuca, and then going into Archaea, all the way up through algae, fungi, plants, and then mammals and insects. The bars at the bottom of this graph illustrate molecules that are light sensitive. These light-sensitive molecules evolved, they transformed, they had genetically changed and organized to be able to form the light-sensitive parts of our organism. The bottom one, called PER, is for period, and this has been conserved since fungus, and as an integral part of our circadian biology. Of interest, these particular molecules started with the rise of oxygen in the atmosphere. And so there is a thought that the metabolism and the ability to use oxygen as a metabolite and a higher form of energy was a reason another particular motivation to start responding to light and dark cycles. So the circadian light sensitive genes on the left are in the fruit fly, and on the right would be the mouse. Now the fruit fly responds directly to light, while the mouse uses an eye. And the particular genes that are shown there and that are in these boxes are not particularly meaningful. But the colors are coded so that they're very similar in terms of their genetic structure between the fruit fly and the mouse. These means that these are highly conserved, and since these two, insect world and mammals, branched out, that is, an earlier form of organisms had this similar structure. So light interacts with a light-sensitive structure and orchestrates a series of dances in which molecules go into the nucleus, change the alteration of proteins. Those proteins migrate out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm and then back to feedback and cause the rhythms that can occur over light and dark cycles. Placed in isolation, these particular regions of the nervous system can exist and show oscillations for days in a petri dish. The human circadian circuit also includes the eye. There's a specialized tract from the eye to something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the site for this transition of molecules that then sends out a variety of signals to indicate that, there is a change in light-dark state. The suprachiasmatic nucleus signals, one way it signals it is through the release of melatonin in the pineal gland. And to do so, the nerves that go from the suprachiasmatic nucleus to the pineal gland travel all the way down to the neck and back. And they do so with these two structures that are probably less than a centimeter apart. And so evolution has used these networks and have molded these networks, and these networks have molded their function with a developing brain and with development of other things going on to highly conserve this system. Light inhibits melatonin, and darkness, melatonin release, and darkness facilitates melatonin. And for the human, the onset of a melatonin release is a signal that darkness is arriving. Now, the SCN also alters metabolism. It does so by sending out a variety of signals to your adrenals, to your fat, to your muscles, and it causes temperature changes, which are the integrated function of metabolism in your body. This is about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and it varies throughout the day in a regular manner. Your particular temperature regulation will vary very little over several periods of days, and that this particular example here shows the onset of sleep as being one feature. And it turns out to be it's easier to fall asleep as temperature is falling, and it's harder to fall asleep as temperature is rising. So one cue for falling asleep is this idea of what your temperature is doing, and that cue from your temperature is coming from your suprachiasmatic nucleus. So sleep emerges and is signaled by this change in suprachiasmatic nucleus activity. So sleep is called an Ultradian rhythm, that is within the day. And this is an example of activity and inactivity profiles in a healthy person over 7 days. The bars, the black bars, show activity, and this is from a wristwatch that a person is wearing. And this particular wristwatch sort of gives a tick every time a person is moving around. And the blue area is where there are very few ticks, and this is when a person would sleep. And midnight is in the middle of this, and you can see in a 7-day period, within some variation, sleep in this particular individual is fairly well regimented. There's about a 7 to 8 hour period. And it's set in this way and reset by the occurrence of light in the morning. So what promotes sleep and what promotes wakefulness? Well, wakefulness is a factor that the strength of the drive to sleep is coupled to the duration of prior wakefulness. The longer you've been awake, the sleepier you will be. Vigilance, which is then the resistance to sleep, is reset to baseline by adequate sleep. So sleep is a function of this particular wakefulness, vigilance. It's intertwined with vigilance. Now, sleep is coupled to an accumulation of some sleep-promoting process during wakefulness. Sleep need is homeostatic, which means that if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be sleepy. Just as much if you don't get enough food, you're going to be hungry, or you don't get enough water, you're going to be thirsty. It is a basic need. Now, the other thing to think about is what is this accumulation that occurs that makes you sleepy? Well, one factor people measure a lot is adenosine. Adenosine is inhibited by coffee. So we use in our daily activities coffee, tea, caffeine to be able to inhibit the accumulation of one of the sleep-promoting substances. So this is sort of a general model for understanding the relationship between process S, which is sleep, and process C, which is circadian. It starts about 9 o'clock in the morning, ends at 9 o'clock the next day. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, as you wake up, there is then an accumulation of sleep load that occurs as a duration of prior wakefulness. But at the same time, there's a circadian alertness, vigilance signal, which increases. And as the sleep load increases, this vigilance signal also increases. There is a little, this is a healthy adult. In the middle of the afternoon, there's a little dip in this vigilance. That's the dark line that's there. There's a little dip. And then the vigilance from your circadian rhythm kicks in again to give you power through that early evening period, and then drops off rapidly when sleep accumulation is high, circadian is low, you sleep, and then the cycle repeats itself the next day. So this particular model puts together the occurrence of sleep within the 24-hour circadian rhythm. Now, I said it's homeostatic, and this is an experiment that's done in fruit flies. So fruit flies are very interesting organisms. They're relatively cheap, so it's pretty good for scientists to look at them. Their genetics are fairly well understood. And so it's interesting that it was only about a few years ago that graduate students were told that they needed to watch and see if fruit flies slept. And they do. They have a little infrared monitor. They look at their inactivity profile, and they have to do it at night. And they have to look at it. And fruit flies develop a characteristic posture. They sit down at the bottom of a little tube, and they sit there immobile. And then, interestingly enough, about the middle of the night, they fall over because they lose tone. So they apparently show all the stages of sleep. So in this example, baseline day is in blue, and that's the bottom line for during the dark period when they're inactive, and then the light, which is a light bar at the bottom for 12 hours, they become very active in the light period. There is a period of time, however, in which they are sleep deprived. 6 hours of sleep deprivation is indicated by the blue bar at the bottom occurs, and then there occurs recovery sleep. This recovery sleep means it's homeostatic. Fruit flies are very interesting because they also respond to caffeine. And they also respond to Valium. They respond to all the things that we use in our pharmacologic armamentarium to be able to promote or inhibit sleep. So this system is fairly hardwired, and it's very precise in terms of how it operates. Now there's some slop to it, back and forth. We all know that sleep-wake cycles are not perfect. But the idea of the basic biology is informed by these studies in fruit flies. So sleep-like states in living organisms emerged out of this circadian rhythm. They emerged in terms of, and they were consolidated into long periods of quiescence with episodic loss of muscle tone. We're not sure exactly how that works. We'll talk a little bit about sleep stages in the next section. They're arousable to full alertness, which means it's different from anesthesia. So when an anesthesiologist says they're going to put you to sleep, don't believe them. They're going to put you to sleep so you don't wake up. Whereas your natural sleep is characterized by arousals. It's homeostatically regulated. That is, if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be sleepy. Even if you're bored, you're not going to fall asleep because you're bored. You're going to fall asleep because you're sleepy. And it's evolved using similar genes and brain molecules that have been present for probably about 1 billion years. And it's modulated by caffeine and hypnotics used today.
That afternoon dip that you showed, that adults or people get sleepy then, is it also seen in other mammals, other creatures, and?
So let me make 2 points about that afternoon dip. That afternoon dip is really a feature that comes on with puberty. Before puberty, there is no afternoon dip, which every mother knows that the 8-year-old goes flat out all afternoon while the mother sits there. And I remember having my wife and kids at the end of the driveway when I drove home at night to say, take care of these people. Now, in terms of this afternoon dip in other organisms can mold their sleep to different times of the day. Mosquitoes, for instance, are more active in the morning and more active in the late afternoon. They sleep during the day as well as during the night. And so these particular sleep-wake cycles are there in order to trigger, probably from an evolutionary pattern, to be able to either avoid predators or to be able to identify food resources that are available at that particular time.
One of the women I work with was just telling me today that every postmenopausal woman can't sleep. Could you say something about that? Is that true, or and what is that about?
Well, the climacteric, which is the loss of hormones there, produces a change in the brain, through both the estrogens and progesterone, that alters your ability to regulate temperature. It's particularly vulnerable during sleep, especially REM sleep. And it's the idea of sleep interruption. This is a delicate balance, and there is a change. Now, some women are affected by it more than others, and particularly those that are predisposed to insomnia to begin with. It's also difficult, and from a medical point of view, to untangle some of the slings and arrows that occur during that period of life as well, as you're getting older, as you're getting illnesses, things of that sort. But certainly replacement therapy, one of the major things that's a benefit is a restoration of better sleep.
How effective is melatonin? Replacement melatonin?
Melatonin is not a sleeping pill. It is a signal for your body to get ready to go to sleep. Ideally, melatonin is taken 2 hours before desired bedtime. And so if it does put you to sleep if you're sleepy, but a placebo will usually put you to sleep when you're sleepy. And so in placebo-controlled trials, melatonin doesn't put people to sleep, but it changes the phase relationship between sleep and circadian rhythm. And as you get older, your melatonin bump is less, and supplemental melatonin in small amounts can be quite useful.
Just had a quick question. Can you comment on when planet Earth wasn't a 24-hour day? And also just comment, you haven't said anything about sleep apnea and what's going on in the brain where melatonin isn't getting the message.
Okay, so first thing first is that your 24-hour circadian rhythm there are people that vary and organisms that vary between 23.3 and 24.5 hours. And the cues and for instance, these cues are seasonal as well because of light and dark. So there's no clock inside me that tells me that. So it's seasonal. In terms of sleep apnea, that will be a topic for next week, which we'll talk about sleep disorders itself.
A little bit more about the circadian rhythm on submarines. I guess they're on an 18-hour cycle, and so they adapt to that. How much change can you have in the rhythm? Can you extend it beyond the 24-hour period?
The experiments in nature like that, or for instance, the 90-minute cycles as the spaceships go, or as capsules go around the United States, the Earth, it's a 90-minute cycle, really disrupt people's sleep-wake system so that they're extremely sleepy. And we don't think, at least the literature does not suggest that people truly adapt to a circadian rhythm because of in submarines. What they do is they get into a regimented wake activity-inactivity profile, and they hope to get enough sleep.
Thank you for joining us. You have been watching Dr. Kingman Strohl of Case Western Reserve University discussing insomnia. For more information on the Origin Science Scholars Program, including a full video archive, please visit the Institute's website at www.case.edu/origins. In the next part of the talk, Dr. Strohl discuss how and why we get sleepy. Now, back to the talk.
So in part 2, we're going to talk about sleep, and I want to emphasize that it's a brain-generated state. The definition of sleep that can be used in all organisms is a state of perceptual disengagement, unresponsiveness to the environment, distinguished by physiologically defined patterns of brain and muscle activity. Now this is an important definition because it can define what sleep is in a snake, as well as it can define what it is in a human. It can define what it is in a fruit fly, and it can define what it is in a dolphin, even if the dolphin sleeps with one hemisphere at a time. So these particular definitions are very important in terms of understanding and looking across organisms for sleep. Sleep duration, that is, how much sleep do I need, varies around species, and that the smaller you are, it appears the more sleep you need, and the larger you are, the less sleep you need. We're not precisely sure what that means, but it may be something to do with energy replacement and body surface area, being able to withstand cooling, for instance, that this might be a particular point, or it may be brain temperature. If we look then at the general theories of sleep, and this is sleep as opposed to wakefulness, we think the primary mode of sleep is to remodel and reconstruct nerve connections that are developed by being awake, and to restore brain energy and eliminate waste. So let me go into more detail about that. As you're listening to me, you are forming synapses which are using activity and energy in your brain to create new memories. You might remember a slide 2 slides ago. That may be gone in 10 minutes, but you still did that. And these particular activities that your brain is doing is using energy, using molecules, using up proteins, incorporating remodeling of synapses to the point that's occurring all the time. It's also using energy. And sleep is a period, and it's recently, maybe you've seen, and it's been in the public press, of new reports that during sleep, that the glial cells get smaller, the vessels get a little bit bigger, and the spaces between nerve cells get bigger, and they eliminate proteins. They eliminate waste. It's called the glymphatics. And so during sleep, you're taking out the garbage, just as much as garbage trucks work at 4 o'clock in the morning in New York City. You got to have time to take out the garbage. So these are the common ideas that you're replenishing your brain. Secondarily, you're replenishing your body. The consolidation of certain types of memory also occurs. These certain types of memory vary according to sleep state. But the general idea in the studies by Robert Stickgold at Harvard University on memory and its implications, sleep and its implications have important ramifications for understanding sleep and memory and Alzheimer's and disorders in which sleep is disrupted and your ability to remember things. When we're very sleepy, it's hard to remember things. And neuroendocrine signaling to the other organs. So, you know, your head sits on top of your body, it orchestrates, and the sciatic, or the suprachiasmatic nucleus also regulates the circadian rhythm of your heart, your kidneys, your liver, and it does and orchestrates this particular dance of trying to facilitate your organ systems and organizes and synchronizes these clocks. Now we can monitor this with polygraphic recordings. So we measure the EEG, the electrical activity of these neurons from the surface electrodes of the brain. We look at eye movements because eye movements occur very often in wakefulness, but they also occur in a state called rapid eye movement sleep, in which eye movements are rapid. Looks very much like wakefulness, but is distinguished by the loss of muscle tone, so we measure muscle tone as well. These recordings from the surface of the brain represent just a small fraction of surface electrodes. There are now more interesting and computationally challenging multiple electrode arrays which can localize things a little bit better that are used in wakefulness that need to be used during sleep. But in this particular approach of just a few electrodes on the brain, EMG and EOG has opened up the world of what is sleep and how it is organized. The architecture, we call it the architecture of sleep states. And there's wakefulness, there's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4 sleep, and then there's rapid eye movement sleep. From an EEG perspective, wakefulness and rapid eye movement sleep are very, very, very similar. They are different only to the extent as during REM sleep you inhibit your muscle activity, presumably so you don't act out your dreams. You may twitch, you move your eyes, do small movements, but you don't, in health, you don't act out your dreams. These sleep states themselves are organized temporally during a 7-hour sleep in a healthy 30-year-old individual. And sleep is entered through stage 1 in adults, stage 1, then 2, then 3, 4, and then you pop up into your first REM period, which is indicated in the blue on this slide, and the cycle then goes on. Now, not shown here is that you will briefly wake up between 8 and 12 times every hour for maybe a half second or so. Maybe just to sort of show your brain that you can do that. But the idea is that these sustained sleep periods occur. Now you also notice that your stage 3 and 4 sleep are less as sleep goes on. And it seems as though those are the major restorative states. And the REM sleep gets a little bit longer as sleep goes on. So shortened sleep, say I only sleep 4 hours a night, beat my chest, is the idea that you really have gotten your slow wave sleep out of the way, but you really haven't restored your REM sleep. And those particular sequences of sleep recovery and recovery from a sleep debt are orchestrated in a fashion occur with this homeostatic response. You spend most of your time in stage 2 sleep, about 20–25% of the time. For an adult in 7 to 8 hours of sleep, they're in rapid eye movement sleep, so it's about 1/5 of the time, and the rest is in slow wave sleep. So what does non-REM sleep do? What does this stage 1, 2, 3, 4 do? Well, there's an increase in brain energy stores that occurs at that time. Seems to be a recovery period. It reduces the complexity of synapses. Because all those memories you just learned, all those synaptic connections have to be sort of culled out. They have to be, the gist has to be figured out. And it resets the efficiency of synapses. The body is restored more in non-REM sleep, and in particular growth hormone, which is an important factor for bone growth, body growth, and muscle growth, especially in children, is produced in slow wave sleep. And big surges of growth hormone do occur. And if sleep is inhibited, that is, you don't sleep for a night, that growth hormone surge does not occur. So sleep restrictions, particularly in children, are thought that those have an important impact on growth, and certain illnesses that disrupt sleep when they are treated and cured will have a growth spurt in children afterwards. So the ontogeny of REM sleep, it's the first stage. REM sleep is the first thing that's happening in the fetus that we can recognize. It's called active sleep. It's time in which there are movements going on. And this occurs between about the 7th month. It's a precursor of REM sleep. And REM happens in about 70% of the entire 24-hour period in the fetus, and especially in the infant. And it appears to drive postsynaptic growth and differentiation. So, and an infant who is just sort of seems lying there sleeping, what they are doing in REM sleep is having these bursts of activity that are projected to the cortex and that start to grow and arborize the responses. Now, how specific they are is another factor, but REM sleep is a driver, a non-specific driver for this postsynaptic growth and differentiation. Inhibiting sleep not only stunts brain growth, but it also leads to behavioral problems by age 8 and 9, and may lead to depressive states in the adult. By the first birthday, however, REM sleep is rapidly whittled down to 20% of sleep time. And by the first year, there's usually about 10 to 12 hours of sleep. Now in the adult, it's only 20% of 8 hours of sleep. So the idea is that REM sleep is very important for postsynaptic growth and differentiation. And this idea that it's important for dreams may just be just a vestigial response to what happens in the infant. Okay. Wake and REM sleep are accompanied by very similar metabolisms in the brain. They're both very active. So the idea that your brain is inactive when you're asleep is certainly not true in REM sleep, and specific parts of your brain in non-REM sleep are more active than they are in wakefulness. In general, however, non-REM sleep has a decreased metabolic rate. So why REM dreaming stage of sleep? Well, the current theories are, first is psychoanalytic. Freud, dreams represent disguised symbols of repressed desires and anxieties. Okay. But the modern iteration is that New Age synthesis is that it resets personality after non-REM sleep. Interesting. You have to reset your personality. Cognitive, that is, REM helps to sift memories and sort the events of the prior day. But the biologic is that perhaps dreams produce a state of activation of brain cells after a bout of inactivity. REM sleep is just preparing you to be awake. And it's particular, maybe it's a combination of all three, because your brain and your actions and your personality is the sum result of your experiences, your brain connections, and how you organize your synaptic connectivity among brain structures. So it's a common experience that a problem that's difficult at night is resolved in the morning after the community of sleep has worked on it. That's John Steinbeck. I think it's true that you wake up in the morning and sometimes things are a little bit easier to understand, that maybe the gist has finally come out of the chaff, that the idea of what to do and the fresh look that you can look at it. The other way of looking at it, of course, is that you've finally taken out the garbage.
What is the function of yawning, especially repeated yawning before you fall asleep?
So yawning has a known function in primates of threat behavior, but probably in sleepiness it's just and it is a common motor behavior. I mean, you recognize a yawn in people anywhere. So there is a yawn center in your brain that is activated. And it's probably loss of voluntary control of that particular center. And the theories that it improves your oxygen or it means your whatever it is not there. It's probably contagious to the point where people recognize yawning and respond to it.
On the slide where you showed the architecture of sleep, you showed that wakefulness is just kind of a single pattern, EEG pattern. Is there a comparable architecture of wakefulness, or is it kind of a homogeneous, just single?
Well, you make a very good point, because running away from an elephant would be a lot different from being able to be meditating. And so alpha rhythms are classic in wakefulness when you close your eyes, a regular rhythmic activity that is slow, is regular, versus the activity that goes on. There's theta activity, there are different frequencies that occur, but in terms of kind of trying to distinguish wakefulness from an operational point of view, we usually call active wakefulness, people moving around, and quiet wakefulness. And the distinction is really made by the amount of artifact in the EEG. That is, if you're moving around and shaking your head and doing things, that's usually active wakefulness. Now, the ability to sort of demonstrate active wakefulness is a major feature in health. So depressed animals and depressed individuals will show less active wakefulness and more quiet wakefulness, even if their sleep is normal.
Why does sleep paralysis happen, and does it happen in REM sleep or non-REM sleep?
So sleep paralysis is a time in which a person wakes up and can't move. They usually are waking up out of REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, in which muscles are inhibited. And it's an example of your brain is not a flip switch. Different parts of your brain fall asleep at different rates, and different parts of your brain wake up at different rates. In this particular instance, it's that your REM sleep persists with an inhibition of muscle activity, but your brain is awake. It's very scary. It can occur in people who are very sleepy as well as those with sleep disorders. And about once a year, one of the residents comes up to me, medical residents, and says, I think I have a disease, because I just couldn't, when I woke up, I couldn't move. And so it's out of REM sleep. Well, it happens because there is a part of your brain that initiates and triggers REM sleep, that sends a signal into your brainstem that inhibits, through a glycinergic system, your alpha motor units of all your muscles. At the same time, it sends messages to your cortex that activate your cortex. So it's doing two things at once. What happens is it lets your cortex start to work, but it still inhibits your muscles. And you can produce that lesion in cats, and you can make them show what they call REM behavior disorder, in which they act out their dreams.
Can you tell me, I don't think I understood what reestablishing your personality is.
Well, I think that this is a theory that people have proposed, that the idea is that if for instance, non-REM sleep was the great eraser, every morning you would have to get up and say, who am I, what's going on, what's happening, and how do I respond? And so the idea of your sum total of how you are, that is, your ability to interact with others, which is characteristic, that particular personality set. I'm not the one that invented that idea. Jouvet was the one that did this, and he thought that this was from, he thought that cats had different personalities, and that when they were inhibited in REM sleep, that their personalities were different. And there is a theory that antidepressants, which suppress REM sleep, were at one time thought to be beneficial because it would be able to sort of allow people to change their personality. That is, their depressive state.
I hope you've been enjoying the Origin Science Scholars Program with Dr. Kingman Strohl, a fellow of the Institute for the Science of Origins. Dr. Strohl is director of the Sleep Disorders Program at the Louis Stokes VA Medical Center and of University Hospital's Case Sleep Disorder Center. In the second part of our talk, we learned about the process of getting sleepy. In our final segment, Dr. Strohl will discuss a variety of sleep disorders and how your symptoms reflect your biology, environment, customs, and behavior. Now, back to our talk.
Part 3. The sleep habitat. So, where do you sleep? How do you sleep? How is it represented in our society, in human society? And then, comparatively speaking, where do we sleep compared to, I don't know, our dogs sleep with us. So our dogs sleep in the same place we do. But they probably didn't when they were in the wild. So the idea is, where do you sleep? How do you sleep? And what is it? So the Hominid Dilemma is that we're bipedal. We have free hands, we have clever hands, brains, we're living and communicating in groups, we perform social roles, but as prey, Infants are dependent on learning, slow developing, unable to run or cling. We're very vulnerable when you're asleep. Very vulnerable. So how did we do it? Well, where did we sleep? 300,000 years ago, where did the groups of humans sleep? Did they do it in trees? And this is a yogi that still sleeps in a tree at night, doesn't fall out. Building nests, sleeping in nests like present chimpanzees. We know that there were caves, roosting sites. Could hominids come to the ground safely? And these are people that are climbing Yosemite that just take their piton and take a tent and bang it into the side of the rock, and because they need to sleep. The need to sleep is very strong. So it's fire. It looks like evidence is that the fire was a very important factor. It could be used as a weapon against other predators. Sleep could be prolonged on the ground in communal structures, and now this sets the stage for lots of things. That's a yurt in the middle of the Mongolian plateau. But you can imagine the communal groups. These are families, but often in El Salvador, for instance, it's communities that sleep in a communal area. And the idea is that in those societies, you had to organize your sleep-wake behavior because it was important, and to be alert, and to be able to do what you needed to do. So now we have sleep machines and sleep workout rooms. What do I mean by that? Well, the technology of the pillow. This is an example of a porcelain pillow from the 9th century in China. But there are different types of pillows. The mattress. You get inundated by advertisements about a mattress. Sleep poorly, get a new mattress. Is that the answer? No, but there's Better Sleep Week in March that's sponsored by the mattress manufacturers. You can now get memory foam. You can do whatever you want to do. We have technology that will help you sleep all the time. Standalone bedroom was an invention of the 17th century. You could then afford to have a room in which you would say, this would be my bedroom. It would not be, the kitchen during the day, or it would be the place where you kept the pigs, or whatever it would be. It would be the one room house now could have 2 rooms, and one would be a bedroom. And this particular concept came out of wealth. It came out of ability to do that because it was very difficult and tiring to build houses. You have to be able to do it for what? And then we add the clock radio, the TV, the coffee maker, the computer, dogs, cats, whatever it is. And now there is a website that has 13,000 different types of beds you can buy, different styles. And you have rooms that you have designers that will design your bedroom with the right lighting and what it is. And guess what? You're asleep. So sleep is a state of perceptual unawareness. And yet, we sleep in a place in which Superman stands by the bed. So the idea about how sleep is organized and where it is now overlaid by this culture of what some might say commercialism, but it's really an important thing to think about. And when you think of this from a sleep machine workout room, it's an example of how another part of evolution, which I think is important, in humans at least, the cultural and social parts of how we creep. People sleep in different parts of the world, people sleep differently than they do in Cleveland. There's communal beds, there's communal living, there's the common bed, there's the idea about sleeping with your children until whatever age it is. It's controversial. People have been doing that for probably several 100,000 years. That's how bad it is. So I think you have to realize that that's what's going on. There's dialecticals in sleep. That has miles to go before we sleep is a metaphor that we talk about. It's death, it's sleep. We have rituals, prayers, cleaning, grooming, the prayers before often sort of say, well, if you can take me during sleep, that's a very nice time to go. But the idea of what you do, speaking with someone, what clothing we sleep in, if anything, that's optional. And then never get caught napping, right? So we have this idea that napping during the day might be sort of a sign of weakness. And there is this sense, in some sort, that being able to have less sleep is manly and to have more sleep is not. This masculine, feminine sort of viewpoint of how we talk about people and how they sleep is an undercurrent. It's found in the literature. It's also found in movies. It's found in various other ways in which we indicate social roles and culture. The other thing where it collides between biology and activities is school performance. In puberty, we talked about this dip, but there is a delay in sleep onset with puberty. That is, that youngster that used to go to sleep at maybe 9 o'clock now is saying, I want to stay up until midnight or 1 o'clock. And you say everybody's doing it. Well, studies have shown that they are biologically changing their temperature profile, and they would prefer to sleep later and sleep in later during the morning. They would do so. The teenager is a night owl. There are larks, and there are night owls, and they are more likely to be a night owl. The delay in school start time can improve performance merely because they get some more sleep. And there is a correlation between average hours of sleep per night and school performance as GPA, shown in several different studies, both in Israel and in Minneapolis and in other areas, comprising some 10 to 25,000 students. And this particular importance about getting enough sleep to take your exam or getting enough sleep to be able to do in school really is important in terms of a cumulative amount of sleep. We'll talk about that next week. In terms of 2 or 3 nights before you do this, rather than the night before. And the battle that you have with teenagers is that on Friday night they go to bed at midnight, and on Saturday night they go to bed at 2 o'clock, and then on Sunday night they have to go to school, and you say at 10 o'clock you need to get your sleep. And in a survey of a fairly high-functioning private school, when my kids were there, showed that 80% of the high schoolers said they had, quote, insomnia. What they really were, delayed phase. And they get in bed, their eyes are open, and they're not ready to go to sleep because generally they've slept in. If you want to pick a battle, pick the battle getting them up in the morning. Don't pick the battle putting them to sleep at night. That's the close. So closing thoughts here. We sleep about 1 hour less per night than in 1900. There was a survey that was done in both urban and rural. Same survey was done in 1995 and then in 2010. It's attributed to the light bulb. We could say it's attributed to the internet. We can attribute it to all sorts of things now. But what it shows is that the value of sleep has changed in the last 100 years. I propose to you that the biology has not. After oil, coffee is the second largest commodity. I think that tells a lot. I don't necessarily think that we use coffee to heat our houses or be able to, we don't eat it. It's not a foodstuff. It's really an alerting substance in a sleep-deprived neighborhood. Starbucks has about 1.5 to 2 times more caffeine per cup than that Maxwell House in 1972. My particular thing is public housing and policy have no inherent sleep agenda. What do I mean by that? When you design public housing, there's really, when I say, well, what about sleep? Where are people going to sleep? How are they going to feel safe sleep? What are they going to have in terms of sound attenuation? They go, what? And they know where the cars are going to go. They know where they're going to be able to get out. They know where they're going to get in. But the idea of having your fire well right next to the bedrooms of all the kids in a structure in which there are lots of teenagers is just difficult to understand. So my goal, if you wanted to say what my goal is and what I've been trying to do, not just as a physician at university hospitals, but not just to someone that sees patients, but in the community and what we try to instill in our fellows and our trainees, is to try to elevate sleep and the ideas about sleep to the same that of exercise and nutrition. So over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been an importance in nutrition. We understand cholesterol. We understand the importance of exercise. The idea of foodstuffs, and we can kind of talk about various things. There are certain, foodies out there. Maybe there should be certain sleepies. That is, people that really know sleep and are able to sit there and intervene. That when a person is sleepy, the public, your human relations director doesn't put out a memo saying, I don't want people to nap on their breaks in the afternoon. Damn it. Wait a second. They're not sleeping because they that's when they want to do it. They're sleepy for a reason. So what are the reasons? The people in society that sleep the least are women that have children and jobs, that they take care of their job, they take care of their children, they take care of the household, and their sleep is about a half hour less per night, which is 1 hour less every 2 days. So you have to think that they're a sleep-deprived group because of what they do and how they do and the expectations we have in society. The other thing that you have to think about in my particular as I look at various things like fall asleep car crashes that occur often in the springtime by teenagers, and the first thing I hear is a car that goes underneath a truck. There's been no braking, and every year we have something like that happen here. And they first say they're looking into alcohol, and 2 days later it says alcohol weren't involved. And then the word comes out that somebody says, yeah, they were really sleepy. They were coming home from a prom at 2 o'clock in the morning. They hadn't been drinking. And the idea of fall asleep car crashes are now are higher than drunk driving in teenagers right now. They drive the driver's education doesn't emphasize fall asleep. We don't emphasize it in elementary school. We don't talk about sleep in terms of the importance of sleep, and we only do it when they're in a phase in which they like to be delayed phase and they have a difficult time falling asleep at night anyway. So I think the level of education and discourse that needs to start earlier, and I think the idea about how to understand sleep and place it in your health habit folder and your arena is quite important. So I know I'm going to be a little bit early, but when I talk about sleep, there are many questions. So I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
This lecture is part of the Origins Science Scholars Program of the Institute for the Science of Origins. The Institute is a partnership of Case Western Reserve University, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, and IdeaStream. The Fall 2014 Origins Science Scholars Lectures are presented with the assistance of the Siegel Lifelong Learning Program, the College of Arts and Sciences, and MediaVision. For more information on the Origins Science Scholars Program, including a full video archive, please visit the Institute's website at www.case.edu/origins.